Welcome everyone to the March 21st, 2024 meeting of the School Performance and Accountability Committee of the Tennessee Public Charter School Commission. Hayden, could you please take a roll call of the commissioners?
Commissioner Griscom.
Here.
Commissioner Richards.
Here.
Chair Patterson.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thanks, Hayden. The School Performance and Accountability Committee will hear several presentations from staff today. First, Director of Authorizing Beth Figueroa will present updates on the 2022-23 annual report. Following her presentation, we will hear school year 23-24 updates from Deputy Director of Authorizing Maggie Lund, Director of School Programs and Supports Nate Parker, and Manager of Data and Operations Lawrence Walker. Then Nate will give us an update on our LEA results-based monitoring. And finally, Beth will present an amendment petition from Bluff City High School. Do commissioners have any questions or comments on the agenda before we vote to approve?
Move its approval.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it, and the agenda has been approved. Next, we have the minutes from the committee meeting held on January 25th, 2024, which have been provided. Does anyone have any edits or comments to make regarding the prior minutes before we proceed?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it, and the minutes are approved. So our first item is the presentation on the 22-23 annual report from Director of Authorizing Beth Figueroa. Beth, good to see you, and you're recognized.
Okay. Thank you, Chair Patterson, and good afternoon. As mentioned, we are going to be presenting the results of the annual report for our schools, and this is really reflective of our schools' school year 22-23 performance. And so in accordance with statute, each authorizer is required to produce an annual report by January 1st of each year. This is traditionally something that we would present to you all at our January meeting, but due to just some data embargo items, we went and decided to present this instead in the month of March. So we have more information that we're able to present today. The annual report does summarize the results of each school's academic, financial, and their organizational performance, and this is all based on the school performance framework. And so the information included in the annual report not only reflects each of our schools' performance, but also speaks to us as a commission and the authorizing work that we do. And so it's really inclusive of a lot of the items that we work on all throughout the school year. And then, as I mentioned, there is still certain information and data that is embargoed. And so while our website does reflect an annual report, it is still fairly bare in nature. And so once the embargo is fully lifted, we will be updating our website with the full annual report with all items populated. And so to begin today's discussion, I thought it would be good to provide just a high-level overview of the Commission's portfolio for school year 22-23. And so included in this annual report are 9 schools, 5 of which are in Memphis, 4 in Metro Nashville Public Schools geographic region, and a total of approximately 3,700 students. And so as we know, we're going to continue scaling year over year, and so next year's annual report will have 13 schools, and then it will continue to grow as we add additional schools to our portfolio. But for 22-23, it's only those 9 schools. So first, within the annual report, we report out all of our schools' academic performance. And academic performance is comprised of 4 key areas. First is our student outcomes section, and this is really aligned with the Tennessee Department of Education's accountability framework, or essentially the letter grade. And this makes up approximately 25 to 35% of our school's overall score. Next is the mission-specific goal. And the mission-specific goal is something that each of our schools independently create, and it really is I think, something that's really great. It's something that kind of nationwide authorizers are looking at, and it's a way that we can honor each of our schools' autonomy, their unique model. And so each school's mission-specific goal is separate and unique to the school, and this makes up 10% of the overall score for each school. And then next, we have comparative performance. This is really when we're able to contextualize our school's performance specifically as it relates to the geographic region. And so comparative achievement is measured by looking at the percentage of students who scored met or exceeded expectations on the state assessments, and we compare that with the resident district. And then additionally, within this indicator, we are looking at subgroup comparative performance. And for this specific indicator, we're looking at how the students at our schools performed relative to the resident district for students with disabilities, English learners, economically disadvantaged, and our Black, Hispanic, and Native American students. And so this does hold a significant weight with our academic portion of our school performance framework, and so this is worth 40%. And then lastly, we have the TVOS, and this is looking at student growth year over year. I will say that for student outcomes in TVOS, you'll see a range, and that is because as we redesigned the framework, it was really important that we were rewarding schools for growth. And so schools that earned a TVOS 4 or 5, they are able to shift some extra points and earn kind of that extra credit for earning that additional TVOS. And so to begin, here are the results of school year 22-23 academic performance, and you'll see comparative performance is currently populated as TBD, and that goes back to the data embargo. We aren't able to specifically list that here, but wanted to provide you with an overall view of where our schools are currently lying as far as academic performance. And then there's those 4 key sections that we just spoke to, and all of that rolls up into the overall academic performance. And so here is where our school's overall academic performance shook out for 22-23. Next, I'm going to shift to financial performance. The financial performance portion of our framework is comprised of both near-term and sustainability indicators. So when we think about our near-term indicators, this is really looking at a school's financial solvency for the coming year. And so we are measuring their current ratio, how many days cash on hand they have, again, with just that focus on, do they have enough money to make it through this school year? And then sustainability indicators, that's more looking long-term. So how does the school their performance, their viability look like over time as far as their overall term of their charter school. And so for specifically for longer term sustainability measures, we're looking at their debt to asset ratio, debt service coverage ratio, items that are looking more further out. Next, we have organizational performance, and so this really is focused on the certain regulatory requirements that our charter schools are required to abide by as established by our charter agreement, federal law, state law, all of those items. And so we are looking specifically at students with disabilities and English learner rights, governance and reporting, school safety, employee rights, all of those kind of large organizational buckets fall within the organizational performance portion of our framework. And I would just note here that deficiencies or weaknesses in an organizational performance could be an indicator of the overall health of the charter school. And so this is a snapshot of where all of our schools fell as far as their financial and organizational performance. I would just note here that we do see kind of as an outlier here Bluff, and that really just goes back to their probationary status, as well as for the financial, they do have some defaults with the loan, and that also goes back to their academic performance. And then NCP, you'll find that it's still pending, and that's because we are working with their auditors with their BEP true-up. So that's something that we are actively working with them on getting their audit so we can populate the annual report with their financial performance. And so as we look at next steps, we have provided all of our schools with a copy of their school-specific annual report, but as I mentioned, we cannot post it publicly just because of that embargo. And so once the embargo is lifted, we will be posting that publicly. And we are also continuing to look at ways that we can present our annual report in a way that reflects all of our schools' performance. But as we know, we're growing and scaling, and I think we were at maybe 60 pages this year. And so as we get more schools, we're trying to find ways that we can efficiently yet still clearly show all of our school data. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Mr. Chairman, may I?
Yes,
Thank
go ahead.
you. That was pretty good, Alan. I just want to point out one thing, because I think it talks about progress we've made and progress that you all have made as a team. Seeing the financial and organizational performance chart, the attention we've given to, to the issues of students with disabilities, English language learners, and to the teacher licensure, that is not where we were. And I understand the outlier with Bluff City, but to see the greens over there really is, that's why I wanted to point that out, because we've really talked about it, focused on it. There were some steps that had been taken by the staff to sort of raise the awareness and that these are important. So I just wanted to say this chart really does signal that we've made good progress.
Yes, I really appreciate that. And I'm not sure what Tess is going to say.
I was just going to add that if you haven't watched the House budget hearing, I highly recommend you do, because we were able to speak to numerous indicators within our performance framework that we show that we track the data, that we're responsive to the data, and it really illustrated, I think, the power of our performance framework to the General Assembly and to critics who oftentimes feel like charters are not being held responsible to their data. And so I just want to compliment Beth and the rest of the team and Maggie and everyone who's rebuilt the framework and where we are. I feel like we have a really good handle on our schools, and we're really pushing them to meet high expectations, and I think it's showing that they are.
Are there any other questions from commissioners? Okay, thanks, Beth.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda are updates on the 23-24 school year from Maggie Lund, Nate Parker, and Lawrence Walker. Maggie, Nate, and Lawrence, you guys are all recognized.
Is the mic on? Okay, great. Good afternoon. It's great to be back. I've missed you all. Okay, so I am going to talk to you about the KIPP Antioch College Prep Middle interim review, and then I'm actually going to call Trent up to speak about pre-opening and site visits. So commission staff completed a 5-year interim review for KIPP Antioch College Prep Middle this spring. The purpose of the interim is to do an in-depth review at the 5-year mark, which is like halfway through the charter term. And the idea is to look at academics, operations, and finance and how the school is trending towards renewal within the next 5 years. KIPP Antioch College Prep Middle submitted an interim report detailing these items on December 1st, 2023, and then commission staff completed a full-day site visit to the school on February 21st. During the site visit, commission staff examined the key areas that we look at during the interim. We looked at performance over the last 5 years. We interviewed school stakeholders, including the governing board chair. And through the interim review, it was determined that KIPP Antioch College Prep Middle is on track for renewal within the next 5 years. This is due to consistently meeting or exceeding expectations on the academic framework, including comparative performance to the resident district, TVOS, and academic proficiency. They've also consistently met standard within the organizational performance sections of our framework and financial performance sections. I do want to note that there is some concern around teacher licensure that we've well documented throughout different annual reporting, and that is also represented within the interim report as well. And the full interim report is included as part of the record for today. So I'll take any questions on the interim report at this time before I turn it over to Trent. Great.
Thank you, Maggie. So first, going to provide an update about our site visits. So since the January commission meeting, commission staff has completed our remaining site visits, and all 13 of our schools have now had their annual visit. Just as a reminder, site visits were broken up between fall and spring semesters, and schools received either a half or full day as determined by site visit protocol. Commission staff were also meeting in the coming weeks to begin preparations for next school year's visits. We did find that opening up the calendar and having visits in the fall and spring was very helpful, and is something that we will continue to do as our portfolio continues to expand. And also just to note that a site visit survey was sent out to school personnel, and we're going to use their responses to kind of help us drive our planning for next year. I'd like to just share some of the overarching trends that we noticed at our site visits. I did touch on some of these positives on this slide when I gave updates in January, but our spring site visits just confirm that these are strengths that we see across our school sites. All of our schools have positive behavior incentive programs or intervention systems and incentive programs in place to promote positive school culture. We had lots of great conversations with parents and families who spoke positively about school communication with them. Our schools are certainly committed to data-driven practices. We see that mostly we have data meetings in the mornings of all of our site visits, so leadership kind of like walks us through their systems and how they collect and respond to data. And then lastly, just another note that we have implemented facility walkthroughs and security reviews this year. That was based on some conversation from you all. And so we created a checklist that was piloted, will be added into the protocol next year as well. But just overall, based on those reviews, knowing that our school buildings are clean, they're secure, they're well maintained. Just a couple common challenges that we saw at each of our schools. One being chronic absenteeism. As you are all aware, and we've talked about before, of course, all schools have struggled with chronic absenteeism post-pandemic. Improvements are definitely being made at our schools, but did want to note that rates are still higher than they were pre-pandemic. Many of our schools that are seeing success lowering those chronic absenteeism rates have done things like hired roles dedicated to supporting attendance full-time. Many have created attendance incentive programs, as well as just invested in additional wraparound services and community partnerships. Another challenge that we saw, and something that's by no means unique to our portfolio, but has just been schools that have faced mid-year departures and have had to adjust staffing or hire accordingly. And with the updates to the state board's EL rule, some schools fell out of compliance with ratios and are making staffing adjustments to provide appropriate services. Nate is actually going to provide much more information regarding this and how our schools are adjusting to this board rule later in this presentation, but it's something that came up at some of our site visits as well. I'll now go ahead and shift into some pre-opening updates. And so first, updates about 2 schools that are new start schools from operators new to the commission that were approved upon appeal in the October 2023 commission meeting. So Invictus Nashville is currently working through securing financing necessary for tenant improvements to their identified facility. While the school is also still pursuing potential contingency plans, if sufficient financing cannot be secured by early April, the school leader and governing board will have to decide if they're going to use their right and exercise the ability to delay for 1 academic year. In a similar vein, Empower Memphis is currently weighing 2 facility options, and one of which has a potential renovation timeline that would allow the school to open in school year 24-25. I was talking with Ms. Olani yesterday. She's in that building with an architect today to get the scope of work necessary for any facility improvements needed. So she and the governing board are also working together, and they will decide on their facility plan by early April, and based on their decision, may have to exercise the ability to delay for 1 academic year. So clearly, the next few weeks are critical for both schools, and we're going to continue working with them. We've moved our monthly check-ins to weekly check-ins to garner more information and just get their updates as they go. We definitely want to thank them and tell you all as commissioners, like both Invictus and Empower have been very collaborative, very transparent. We've had the opportunity to meet with their school leaders, with board members. So it's been really helpful for us. And we'll, get their updates obviously in the next few weeks as more updates are forthcoming. And then just lastly, I will touch on 4 more schools that are set to open under the commission in school year 24-25. 2 of these schools are new start schools from existing operators in our portfolio. 2 are existing schools that are transitioning to the commission. So we are also meeting with these schools monthly, and each of them remain on track for opening in school year 24-25. I can take any questions if there are any before I pass it back over to Maggie.
Mr. Chairman, may I make one comment?
Yes, go ahead. You're recognized.
On your slide that talked about buildings, I just think it's important for us to be on the record that buildings are important. And for our schools, being able to identify a facility, to find the financing, and that for those suggestions that have been made, that a change in legislation allowing our schools to have the opportunity to look at vacant buildings in school districts isn't about this trying to make money or turn a real estate deal. It really is about providing a facility so we can open a school. And having seen that statement of the last week or so, Hayden, I just wanted to sort of make that comment because we deal with this all the time. Our schools do. And I'm just glad to see the legislature apparently appears to be getting ready to pass legislation that hopefully gives some greater latitude to our schools.
Mr. Chair,
Thank you.
can I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead, Commissioner Smith.
Can you speak a little bit more? I was really worried when I saw that about Invictus, knowing that the lottery process has now closed for MNPS, I assume so in Memphis as well. Has there been communication with those families? Ironically, I was talking to a family last night, friend of a friend who's enrolled at Invictus for the fall. Do they know that it might not open, and what? I'm worried those families won't get in other charters or their neighborhood schools at this point.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I will say both Invictus and Empower, similar situations as you said. We kind of like complimented them in their like student-first, student-centered decision that they're making here. Both Invictus and Empower have had like ongoing communication to families and have both talked about weighing what is currently like being decided with the families that have been going through that enrollment process. So I do know that they have both had like ongoing communications with their families and just trying to be as like clear and transparent as they can. Because to your point, families are like making decisions now. So yeah, I would just say that like both Ms. Olani and Dr. Jones have talked about that like pretty thoroughly in our updates about how they're like communicating and really trying to keep that at their at the forefront when they're making this decision.
Any other questions? Thank you tonight.
Thanks. Well, I'll pass it back over to Maggie.
Okay, as a reminder, Bluff City High School was placed on probationary status for school year 23-24 due to lack of adequate marginal improvement across the outlined improvement objectives that are within the plan of correction. Bluff City revised their plan of correction for this school year, and we meet with the school and their leadership bi-monthly, so every other month, to garner updates on their progress within the indicators within the plan of correction. The most recent plan of correction meeting took place on March 5th. That was during their annual site visit. Commission staff will continue these meetings with Bluff City to review their progress towards these improvement objectives. And while these improvement objectives within the plan of correction are mostly academic in nature, commission staff will also check in with Bluff City leadership during these touch points on organizational performance and track progress related to the amendment petition, which you're going to be discussing shortly here. So just as a little update, after the last meeting that we had with the school, I wanted to give you some ways in which the school is trending with some of the indicators in the plan of correction. So one of the strengths that we are seeing at this point in the year with Bluff City is that their chronic absenteeism rate has decreased from school year 22-23, and they're currently sitting around 48%. Bluff City has also increased their efforts to improve post-secondary success for students, and their current estimated ready graduate indicator has substantially increased from last year. And just as a note, the Ready Graduate Indicator has a lot of different pieces that go into it. Those are things including certain scores on ACTs, college credit, industry credentialing, et cetera. Do want to note that there are still some ongoing challenges when it comes to a couple of the indicators. One is enrollment. As of March 4th, the enrollment was 446 students, which is below the goal that's outlined within the plan of correction. And additionally, the goal within the plan of correction for suspensions was to reduce suspensions to 35 unique non-zero tolerance suspensions or below for that school year. And at the time of the site visit, the school was at 35 unique non-zero tolerance suspensions. So it could be implied that, since we still had time remaining in the year, it's possible that the school will most likely exceed that goal. And then we have also received internal assessment data for the spring administrations. And as a reminder, those are predictors for TN Ready performance at the end of the year. We do have that data, and that data will be present as part of the site visit report that will come out for that school that will go in much more detail in terms of how they're trending, because those indicators are also within the plan of correction. And so that was discussed at the site visit as well. And at this point, if there are no questions, I'll turn it over to Lawrence.
All right, thank you and good afternoon. I'm going to give a quick update about our TCAP assessments for this year, our 2 timelines that we're working with, and then some things that we've seen change. So as you can see here, we've had lots of checkpoints with schools throughout the year for TCAP, and this is kind of our remaining schedule. So our administration window is going to open on April 15th. It's going to be for all the other exams that we have. TCAP Alt has already started, and TCAP for DLM has already started. The rest of these we're going to just kind of work through April and May, and then all schools will be done testing on May 3rd, and then everything should be shipped out back to Pearson by May 10th. Some updates and things that we've seen change. Number one, this is probably my favorite. We've had tons of fun, I'll say, with our logistics here and trying to get materials to Memphis. Shout out to the team, because I tap them all the time to help move around boxes and load trucks and all that stuff. But this year we've secured a location in Memphis, so schools can come to us at that location, pick up their materials, be on their merry way. The next big update is that...
Just thank DIDD.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, DIDD, for that. We'll be in Arlington at their location. The next big update is for the DLM portal, the dynamic learning maps. That is replacing MSAA. So grades 3 through 8 and then grade 11 for ELA and math, alternate assessments are going to be on the DLM platform. The benefit of that is that schools have the option of testing in fall and spring instead of just trying to cram everything in the spring semester when those are a little bit more intensive with teachers and students. And then another big update is for grade 3 retake. That is a hot topic, of course, but some of the deadlines have been moved up a little. I'll show you the timeline on the next slide, but the ELA materials are prioritized for TCAP, so they will be completed, shipped out early so that Pearson will have time for grading and validation. And then so that schools can get ready now for that retake period, the administrative scripts, training documents are already out. And I believe TDOE is making some recordings that they're pushing out as well. This is our window or our timeline for the grade 3 retake. I'll say I'm going to give the timeline today. Tess and Hayden are going to go into the weeds about this during their presentation. But as I said, April 15, we're going to start the assessments. That first few days, I think 10 days, is going to be for ELA. They prioritize that. They get that stuff sent out. And then the summer camp pretest will open on May 13. On May 20, we should have all of the ELA raw scores and proficiency determinations. And then the retake window is going to open on the 22nd, go through the 31st. We'll have the appeals window running through June 28th, and then the post-test for summer programming. So some of that is kind of coinciding with the rest of TCAP, and then it'll keep going after the school year is over. But again, Tess and Hayden will get into the weeds with that as we go. Any questions about any of the assessment? All right, thanks. I'll pass it to Nate.
Okay, good afternoon. At this time, I'll provide you with a few updates from our school programs and supports team. So first, as part of our role is to conduct ongoing monitoring and oversight of our school programs serving students with disabilities through internal quarterly monitoring of student IEPs. Additionally, the department conducts desktop monitoring of each district annually through the TN Pulse platform. The department conducted their desktop monitoring in the fall, and we received our feedback at the beginning of February. Katie Bridges, our coordinator of special population, has been working with each school to resolve any issues that were identified in TN Pulse. So we have a few takeaways having gone through this process this year that will inform our technical assistance and supports that we provide to schools moving forward. Number one, the vast majority of issues that schools had involved incomplete or inadequate re-evaluation reports within IEPs. Most of these were completed by a previous school, so there were issues that existed that were not corrected upon enrollment at the new school. So here we will work with schools to determine best practices regarding reviewing and updating re-evaluation reports when enrolling a student with an IEP. The next two issues were identified earlier this summer when the department provides training annually. And they are around the development of measurable annual goals and adverse impact statements, which are both within an IEP. They are quite prescriptive, and so while our schools include these in their IEPs, there might be a very specific component that's missing. And so here we are providing additional training to schools and sharing templates the department provides in order to help them with the construction of their goals. And finally, a lot of the feedback was comprised of small fixes throughout various IEPs. So for example, an unchecked box or a missing signature on a page. So here we are continuing to meet monthly with school special education coordinators to ensure that in addition to our district monitoring, there are internal processes to identify these issues within IEPs on an ongoing basis. Next, I'll transition, for our updates for the English Learner Program at our schools. First, Katie Bridges was selected to participate in the department's EL working group, which will meet bi-monthly this spring to talk through various English learner topics of discussion. We're excited for this opportunity to have her network with other districts and also share our district's unique perspective during these conversations. Next, the department announced in January that Tennessee is transitioning from WIDA to a new English learner screener beginning on July 1 of this year. We will work to keep our schools informed as we learn more about the new screener and the transition. The department has planned a training for the new program in May, and we will have representatives from our district attend that in-person event. Also, the department announced in February that only EL students with a completed ILP and T and Pulse will receive TISA funding in fiscal year 25. Melanie mentioned this earlier. So we continue to work to provide supports to our schools to make sure that 100% of their individual learning plans or ILPs are completed correctly in T and Pulse. I want to definitely shout out Katie here. She deserves immense praise for her efforts to comb through each school's ILPs in their T and Pulse. A lot of these issues were as a result of the rocky rollout of T and Pulse earlier this year. And some of the direction and guidance we've received from the department has created additional confusion for our schools. So Katie has taken it upon herself to really go through and make sure our schools are making progress. At this point, the majority of our schools have 100% completed, but there was a few schools that we're working with to get across the finish line here. And the last ESL update is regarding the staffing ratio, which Trent mentioned earlier. I've talked about this before, but following a rule change within State Board rule, the Commission self-reported on our annual LA compliance report in the fall that our staffing ratio did not meet the 1:35 teacher EL student requirement. So in years past, it met because we were able to use head counts, but when they transitioned to FTEs and only counting the the amount of time a teacher was providing direct services, some of our schools no longer met the requirement. As a result of self-identifying on our compliance report, the Commission communicated and trained each school on the new rule and how to calculate its ESL staffing ratio moving forward. Commission is currently at a 1:37 ratio, so we're very close. And we are submitting a staffing plan for next year as a corrective action as part of our LEA results-based monitoring process, which I'll talk more here about in a little bit. But this was one of our findings that we knew going into the RBM process that we would receive because we had self-identified it in advance of their site visit, and we've been working on it since October to resolve the issue. Based on our projections, the Commission's expecting a 1:32 ESL ratio for next school year. This is a result of us assisting our schools with how to properly schedule and count their existing staff, as well as identifying for schools where they may need to hire additional ESL teachers for next year. We have completed our ESL staffing plan for the department, which we are currently reviewing internally, and then we'll submit next week for approval as part of our RBM process. And we will continue to work with our schools through the spring and then to the fall of next year to make sure that we are implementing that staffing plan with fidelity. And I'll close with just two quick updates in our federal programs work stream. We are currently working on our district plan. This is something that districts do each year. So we are working on our 24-25 LEA plan and submitted our first draft in February. The department completed their review of our first draft on March 15th, and so currently our team is working through making any necessary revisions and addressing feedback within that plan, which will be resubmitted at the beginning of April. Our LEA plan includes the same 5 goals as it has in past years, but we've updated it to better align to our school performance framework, as well as address changes in law specifically around ILPs and ILPDs. The approved final LEA plan will provide the framework for our schools when the school improvement plan process kicks off in May. And finally, I know that we've talked a lot about the results-based monitoring process our district has gone through, but we also have a process that we do at the school level each spring. And so the Commission has begun its annual school level results-based monitoring at the beginning of this week, actually, and it's where we review each school's compliance with federal and state laws. Commission staff have worked to streamline our monitoring instrument in response to our own monitoring results we received this year, as well as streamlining it with our LEA planning process. We've also ensured that our monitoring instrument will be able to provide us baseline data to support our new risk assessment process that we're rolling out for next school year. And finally, in an effort to make sure that we're reducing administrative burden in our schools, we created a unique instrument for KIPP Antioch Middle School and Lester Prep. We removed any questions that they had already addressed as a result of participating in site visits for our RBM process. Are there any questions on these updates at this time?
Mr. Chair,
Let's go ahead.
and this is truly something that I don't know
if there's been conversations or you've had conversations, but one of the issues that's impacting, again, our scholars and young people today is this issue, the fact that they have different learning behaviors, so neurodivergence. Share with me if those are conversations that you're having, and to what degree, because I'm a grandparent of two autistic young boys who I love dearly. They're extremely bright, but those parents have my son and his wife, not only in terms of, again, the personal time that they spend in terms of working with these kids, and they're great kids, but there's also costs in terms of the support that they have to provide. And my kids are privileged children, so they have means to look at providing that basic support, which 99% don't. But share with me, those types of conversations that you're having with, again, your peers. Are they taking place?
So when a school's working with a family to develop an IEP, an individual education program for their child, they're looking at all the evidence in front of them, testing data or additional data they're collecting through their various service providers, and they use that to develop something that's going to support the needs of that child. And what Tennessee has done recently with this shift in funding is they've allocated additional funds for based on unique learning needs that give additional funds for students that require more support. So that's something that was actually reflected within the TISA model, that we have students that generate more funding that can be used to provide them additional services that might be required as part of their IEP. So as far as the conversations that we're having, schools are having those conversations as part of the IEP team that's required under IDEA. And they ultimately are able to use all the funds provided through TISA, and then also our federal funds that we push down to them through IDEA. We do not hold any of that back at the district level. We push 100% of those funds down to our schools to provide them maximum flexibility in determining how they can best support students depending on whatever needs that they have. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Are there any other questions from commissioners? Okay, thank you. The final item on our agenda is an amendment petition. Yes, is an amendment petition. Oh, the LA, oh, you're
Still
right.
me, sorry, I know, I'm back.
Oh, that's right, it's still Nate.
Just have to switch.
Next, we have the update on LEA results-based monitoring from Nate.
Yeah, I know. Just had to
Nate,
switch
you're
to
still
new
here.
slide. My
You're still-
apologies.
All right.
As I mentioned before about our school-level monitoring that we rolled out this week, but we are working to close out our district results-based monitoring process that we have been working through this school year. So I'm excited to provide update there and how we will be closing out that process. So as a recap, in September of 2023, the commission was selected for Level 3 results-based monitoring by the Tennessee Department of Education for fiscal year 24. This required additional pre-work as well as a site visit at our district office and our 2 school sites selected by the department. In prior years, we had participated as a Level 1 district, and this was just a self-assessment on ePlan, our ePlan system. This is the first time we went through as Level 3, which coincided with my hiring as well as my 2 coordinators hiring, so that's been exciting for all of us, but we definitely learned a lot through the process. In October of 2023, we trained our commission staff who were involved in the RBM process, as well as staffs from our 2 schools that were selected for site visits. We discussed the process, the timelines, and deliverables that they would be responsible for. And our first deadline was in January 2024. We submitted all of our pre-work for review by the department on time. And then in February 2024, this is when the department conducted their site visits. So there was a day-long site visit at our offices in Nashville, and then they also spent a half day with part of their the department staff at Lesser Prep, and then the others at KIPP Antioch Middle School. And then earlier this month, the department, we met with them again to debrief us on the conclusion of their monitoring and findings, and then what corrective action was required as a result of that. So first, some highlights from the process. The department praised the commission for its organization, its leadership, and our willingness to work with the department staff as they navigated monitoring of our very unique LEA. It created some additional questions for the department on how to figure out how some of this would work for our district. So it was definitely a collaborative effort. They specifically praised KIPP Antioch Middle School's ESL program and specifically their staff for their knowledge and alignment of the program implementation, which I wanted to share. Of the 25 relevant monitoring indicators, 16 of them, or 2/3, had no findings. In total, 9 indicators had a combined 15 findings in the following areas. So there were 6 associated with ESSA, 6 with IDEA, and then 3 with fiscal oversight. Of the 15 findings, about half of them were very minor school-level implementation revisions to documentation that was uploaded as part of that review. And no LEA-level policy updates or major program changes are necessary as a result of their findings. The monitoring results are broken down by grant type and subject. So for our district, the sections that were applicable included cross-cutting, which were kind of district-wide initiatives, ESSA, which is the Every Student Succeeds Act. This includes our title funds, Title I, II, III, IV, as well as Title IX requirements. IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. This is the law that governs special education. There was a section on relief funding, so specifically ESSER 2 and 3. And then finally, a section on fiscal oversight. This is all things fiscal, compensation, travel, reimbursement for federal grant programs. In all, there were 25 relevant indicators for our district. As shown here, 16 of those top 2 boxes were fully met. So the improvements recommended were optional recommendations that we'll consider once we have addressed all of the required actions. 2 indicators had at least 1 state finding, and then 7 indicators had at least 1 federal finding. And as we were sitting there in our debrief meeting, we were alarmed at first because we saw the number of findings, but when we quickly realized that they're not all created equal. One of our findings was changing 1 word in a handbook. So they're not necessarily significant in terms of the amount of work, but this is just how they classify them regarding if they're a state or a federal law. So what I'll do is I'll just provide a brief overview of our 3 sections where we had findings, ESSA, IDEA, and fiscal, and just kind of a status update on where we are in addressing those corrective action requirements. So first is ESSA, and I have organized here with the finding topic, the title grant, and kind of a brief description, the action that's required of our district or our schools, the finding level, where the action needs to occur at the district level or LEA or school level. And then I categorize them in terms of finding impact. So think of this as high impact would be something that would require a considerable amount of work at either the school or district level and have a wider impact in terms of how we change the work that we do, whereas low impact would be something very small, quick fix, low-hanging fruit. So we just had 2 findings that I qualified as high impact. The first was coming out of Title I around family engagement. Our LEA has a family engagement policy. The department requested that we update it to be aligned with the template provided by the department, as well as showing evidence that there's meaningful parent input within that plan. Obviously, this is something that is a little bit more of a challenge for our district, which we discussed with the department during our debrief, given the fact that we span technically across the entire state and involve parents from very different communities. However, we have already drafted a new plan that we'll submit to the department for preliminary review, and then we'll use the spring to provide an opportunity for parents to provide input on that. Moving forward, this is something that we can integrate within our LEA planning process, so it will be streamlined and be much easier to keep this updated annually. But that's the only thing that we had out of our Title I section. We had 4 areas from Title III, which is around the ESL programming, English learners. The biggest one I already addressed, the staffing ratio. Again, we knew this was an issue going into the RBM process and have already completed most of the work before a site visit, and we were on track to meet this and close out this item next week. The next 2 were regarding documents that schools uploaded for review. So they had to upload their schedules for their teachers providing ESL supports, and they also had to upload examples of their ILPs. And so some schools had issues that they had to address. They were pretty minor, and Katie's been working to get all of those resolved and uploaded for final review. And then the last two were pretty small. That last Title III was the one word in KIP's handbook. Just updated that. That's done, and it's already been approved. And then also Title IX, which is around education of homeless youth. KIP had homeless posters that had the MMPS contact information because they use the same poster from their other schools. So they just updated it with our contact information, and it's done. Moving on to IDEA. So all 6 of these findings were regarding making changes to our existing procedures that help our schools provide their special education services. So all of these are at the LEA level. Most of them were relatively small changes. The biggest finding here was just around creating more robust RTI procedures. This is an example of how we're always trying to respect our autonomy of our schools and the choices that they make to provide academic support for their children. However, there were just some areas identified within the RTI process that we needed to make sure were consistent across all schools. So we have completed that procedure document and are submitting that for final review. I also label this as high impact because it does require, in addition to training our schools, us to collect and submit examples of our schools implementing the changes. So just an extra step that we'll hopefully complete this spring. The rest of the items on here were all completed already. They're all procedures that Tess and Ashley have reviewed, so we're getting ready to upload these for final department approval. But again, they are, for the first one, extended school year, or second one on the list, it was providing clarity around how to determine whether or not a student qualifies for extended school year services. Child find process was providing clarity around the timeline for those determinations. Isolation and restraint was just ensuring that our procedures had been fully aligned to changes made within TCA and State Board rule. Students with disability confidentiality, we uploaded additional language that existed elsewhere, but just embedded that within our procedures to make it very clear. And then finally, our procedures around behavior planning process, we clarified those procedures as well per the LEA request, or per the department's request. So all these have been completed when we're uploading it, and then the next step on all of these in April is to train our schools, and then that will close out the findings for the items 2 through 5, or 2 through 6. And then finally, these are our fiscal findings, and the shortness of the list is a testament to Melanie Harrell and all the work that she put into constructing the program that we have, our fiscal team and everything, but also the amount of work that she put into this process to make sure everything was complete. So thank you so much, Melanie. Each of these was a school level finding. So the first one, they just asked us to upload KIP's HR policy handbook, which we did. And then the next one was around time and effort logs. And so 2 schools had to upload semi-annual certifications, and we are in the process of collecting and uploading those. And then the last one, 3 schools were identified as having inventory lists that needed updates. So we will be communicating with them in April and having them upload those as well. This one I labeled as a medium impact just because we've been reflecting on our inventory lists and also how we ensure our schools are maintaining their inventory lists. And so we did talk about potentially adding to our annual site visits a step to just check inventory while we're there. So not a huge lift for schools by any means, but just something that we did take away from this as a way that we can improve how we manage our inventory as a district. So next steps. So earlier this month, we communicated all these findings, deliverables, and timeline to our district team as well as our school teams that were impacted. Currently, we're revising all necessary procedures and plans and are submitting them as they're completed to the department for their review and approval. In April, all of our approved procedures will be posted to our website, and then we'll train our schools on any changes that were made. In May, we will collect parent input on our new LEA Family Engagement Plan, and then hopefully we'll be able to collect our RTI data as well, which will be one of the last things that we have to do for our corrective action. And then by June, we'll be able to post our Family Engagement Plan to our website that includes parent input. If needed, in the fall, we might have to collect RTI evidence if we're not able to collect it this spring. But we will also follow up with our schools regarding their ESL staffing plan to make sure that it's been completed as discussed. And then finally, I'll close out with just some lessons learned. Again, this was a unique experience having our school program staff all hired this summer and come on board while we had to evaluate our procedures as we were learning them. But one big takeaway that I had was that the commission has very strong policies and procedures that are aligned to state and federal law and are updated on an annual basis. So that is a huge testament to our founding staff, but specifically Tess, Ashley, Melanie, and Kelly, who really built out strong procedures and policies in a way to make sure that they are always up to date. And so that's definitely the reason why this process went so smoothly. Additionally, our existing means of monitoring and providing oversight to manage all these programs has been very effective overall. One tension that we are continuing to acknowledge is within our district, we're always trying to preserve school autonomy. So this will likely result in there always being some small findings that exist, and I think that that's something that we have to be comfortable with, and our focus should be on making sure that we don't have any major findings, or that we are catching things as they come up, and not always waiting to catch them when the department is doing a level 3 results-based monitoring. But like I said, nothing was major in terms of our corrective action, so we're doing a good job in our ongoing monitoring and oversight. The LA team is examining our existing systems to build in additional checks for compliance without increasing the burden on our schools. So we have taken a step back and evaluated what we're currently doing to seeing where we can make improvements for next year and how can we increase our oversight without creating any new oversight plans. And so that's something that we're looking at our school level monitoring, our annual site visits, and how we can improve those based on our experience this year. And then finally, the fiscal team has identified several areas to streamline their processes, for example, around procurement reporting, their inventory tracking, and their reimbursement schedules as a result of the RVM process. So while it certainly created some additional work for our team this year, we definitely walked away from it with a strong sense of what we were doing well and where we can make some improvements heading into the future. And that concludes my updates, and I can take any questions you have at this time.
Mr. Chairman, I've got a question.
You're recognized, Chair Richards.
Thank you. What do you anticipate for the RBM process for next year?
So hopefully we'll be level 1, and we won't have to go through this again. One of the reasons that we were identified for level 3 this year is that we had never gone through it before, and I believe the state board had never gone through it either. And so there had been frank conversations with the department prior to me joining about that it would have to happen eventually. And so it was this year. But I would say based on the level of findings, which were very minimal, that I would expect us to be level 1 again next year. The department staff made comments about how they would send their kids to our schools. They reiterated frequently as we've been working with them this month to make updates to our procedures about how small the level of findings that we have are. So they've reassured us that it was a very positive process. So I would think that we'd be level 1 again next year.
Thank you.
Any other questions from commissioners? Seeing none, thank you. One thing that comes to mind before we move to the final item on the agenda is if there's anything about the Public Charter School Commission is we're going to get our rules, policy, and accountability together. And I can say that as a former chair of the Rules, Policy, and Governance Committee, but also it spills over into this committee as well. So hats off to the team. Thank you, guys. I know it can seem mundane, but it is certainly a very important aspect of this work, and it's really important for the public to hear that and also see that on a daily basis. So thank you, Tess, to you and your team. The final item we have on our agenda is an amendment petition from Bluff City High School, and that will be presented by Beth Figueroa. Beth, you're recognized again.
Thank you, Chair Patterson. As you mentioned, today we're going to discuss the amendment petition that was filed by Bluff City High School requesting a material modification to their charter agreement. There's a number of reasons in which charter schools have to go through the amendment process, and this one is really procedural in nature, and I'm just going to walk through the different elements of the amendment as well as the recommendation. And so just some background information. Bluff City High School opened in school year 17-18, and it has been a part of our commission's portfolio since the commission assumed responsibilities for authorizing schools from the State Board of Education. Bluff City operates in the southeast region of Memphis, serving students in grades 9 through 12, and their current enrollment sits at approximately 446 students. As we previously discussed in a prior presentation today, Bluff City has been on academic probation since the fall of 2022 due to the school's failure to meet academic performance targets, including the Commission's academic performance framework. While we are aware of the academic challenges that Bluff City has faced throughout its charter term, the amendment petition filed by the operator is really focused on some necessary organizational shifts that are occurring at the network level. And so under Bluff City High School's current operational setup and the charter agreement that we have with them, Green Dot Tennessee, who is the operator of Bluff City High School, contracts with Green Dot Public Schools National for back office services. And so when we talk about back office services that are currently being provided by Green Dot National, we're referring to items such as their finance, accounting, payroll, data, IT, their student information systems, human resources, development and advancement, as well as their legal services. So that's what we're referring to when we talk about the back office services transitioning from the national network level to this newly organized CMO. And so in the fall of 2023, Green Dot Tennessee, who operates Bluff City High School, was notified that Green Dot National, the network's current charter management organization, or CMO, would be dissolving effective June 30th of 2024. And as a result of this dissolution, Green Dot Tennessee now needed to work on forming a local CMO that would assume those back office services that are currently being provided at the national level. Since there would no longer be that affiliation with Green Dot National, Green Dot Tennessee will also go through the process of renaming and rebranding itself as a Tennessee network. These changes, as I mentioned, do constitute a material revision to Bluff City High School's current charter agreement. And as such, the school went about that procedural process of submitting an amendment petition for consideration. Before I jump into the specific items related to the amendment petition, I do just want to frame today's discussion to emphasize that Green Dot National is dissolving, as I mentioned, as of June 30th, 2024. And so Green Dot Tennessee really has no other option. There is no longer going to be a CMO for them to contract with. And so as such, that is why they are forming a new CMO responsible for overseeing the day-to-day operations of all of their Tennessee schools, in which Bluff City High School is one of those schools. Commission staff independently reviewed the amendment petition. We reviewed the attachments, budgets, and we also asked additional follow-up questions from the school specifics to their academics, their operations, and financial elements of the amendment petition. And so a few key highlights that came from our review of their amendment petition include that by shifting from Green Dot National to Green Dot Tennessee, or whatever that is that they specifically rebrand themselves as, they would be able to it provides them the opportunity to be fully devoted to Tennessee's academic standards and initiatives, because as previously being a part of a national network, there was some give and take and push and pull when it came to curriculum and all of those items. And so being a Tennessee-based CMO, they can now focus solely on Tennessee academic standards. The amendment petition also details how back office services would be transitioned from the national level to the local level, and this includes having a CMO fee structure that is sufficient to cover the cost of these services, and all the while maintaining positive net financial position year over year. We have had some pretty thorough discussions with them surrounding contingency planning, and in those discussions, they were able to describe the different financial modeling that they're currently doing in order to ensure that they can right-size the organization should they need to cut expenses or make certain organizational adjustments. And then additionally, the amendment petition does provide a very detailed implementation plan and a timeline for these needed operational shifts. And so, for example, as we went through the amendment process, they have steering committees that have already been put in place to talk about next steps and replacement systems. So as an example, they've already started working with a back office provider for finances as well as their payroll. So all of these pieces are already in motion, so that way they have the proper runway to get the necessary systems in place. And then lastly, I would say that the amendment outlines a clear plan for engaging their different stakeholders. And so that includes a plan for notifying their staff, families, students, and the community of these changes. And so as I close here, I would just add that while the petition centers on changes in the organizational structure, and it's most likely to have an impact really at the operations level of Bluff City, the ability to ensure operational efficiencies ultimately has a direct impact on the delivery of academic programming to students, which we know is very key. And so as a part of this process, we had our site visit in March, and we engaged in a really, I would say, transparent and robust conversation with the school and network leadership, really emphasizing how the newly restructured network must continue to focus on improving academic outcomes. And so even though these organization shifts are occurring, that can't take away from the delivery of quality instructions for their students. They have to they need to focus on both simultaneously. And so with that said, the recommendation for approval comes with continued strict oversight to ensure the smooth and accountable transition process for Bluff City High School. And the oversight is in addition to Bluff City's current corrective action plan, which is a part of their probationary status, and we would continue to meet with them bi-monthly or potentially even monthly as needed to ensure that smooth transition process. And so included in the recommendation is continued tracking and monitoring of the school's enrollment, their staffing, financial stability, and operations over the next 6 months. And we would continue to keep you commissioners informed in our quarterly meetings, specifically in July and October, related to these changes. And so at this time, I'm happy to take any questions related to the amendment.
Thank you, Beth. Are there any questions from commissioners?
I think, just to be real clear, this is an administrative action that has to happen. But this action does not impact the current probationary status that Bluff City is under. I think that's what you said. Is that
Correct. They will remain on academic probation.
Any other questions?
I just have a question. It appears that this monitoring that you're going to have to undertake is going to have to be significant and regular and repetitive with constant questioning of the Bluff City administration as to what's going on. I would just urge that if there are problems that occur, that we not wait to a scheduled meeting, but that our executive director make sure that if we need to be advised of something or we need to meet in between, that we undertake that appropriately.
Absolutely, I appreciate that. And as you mentioned, we will be happy to meet more frequently. And I will say, even going through this whole amendment process, we were probably speaking with the school weekly. We've also engaged with their board chair and had a conversation really at all levels of the organization, and we'll continue to do so. Thank you.
Yes, you're recognized. Without your cell phone.
So the continued strict, the words you used in the recommendation is there'll be continued strict oversight. Is there any incremental you may have said this and I missed it, but is there any incremental oversight beyond what you're already doing, or you're just saying what we're already doing because of the probationary status we're going to keep doing?
So within the amendment petition itself, there was a detailed timeline for notifying teachers. There's details related to the steering committee, acquiring and contracting with back office service providers. And so all of those timelines that they lay out, similar to our pre-opening process, we've discussed having something very similar where we would start with the amendment petition as a starting point and then hold the school accountable for those dates. And if we see that any items were slipping, we would have discussions. And I'll just say, just candidly, in this site visit, we had some pretty, serious conversations about, like, we can't afford to have timelines slip. The operations of a school, it's really paramount to the successful academic delivery. So we would continue to monitor those.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chair, can I ask one?
Sure. Commissioner Smith.
Beth, thank you for outlining kind of what would shift from national to state. Did you mention development, so fundraising would be one of those?
Yes.
So is that, I'm curious if they rely on fundraising much, or is that something that's of concern to you guys?
Personally, from my review of their finances as a part of the performance framework, the majority of their funds are not generated through fundraising at this time.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thanks, Beth. If there are no other questions, do we have a motion to move Bluff City High School's amendment petition and updated charter agreement to the commission for consideration?
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the ayes have it, and the amendment petition and the charter agreement are moved to the full commission for consideration. Thank you again, Beth, and to the team. Thank you all for your attendance and participation at this meeting of the School Performance and Accountability Committee of the Tennessee Public Charter School Commission. At this time, I'd like to ask if there are any final comments from commissioners. The next meeting of the School Performance and Accountability Committee is scheduled for July 25th of 2024. Do we have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
All those in favor? Aye. The ayes have it, and we are adjourned. Thank you.